Hello, thanks for tuning in. This is my first YouTube video. This is making a Dutch door. This is for a high-end playhouse that I built. The video, I'm a little late getting started. I didn't record the first part of the build, which was taking the rough sawn lumber and getting it to the condition you see here and doing the mortise and tenon joinery. I might do an update video to show how to do that, but I'm just going to try to take it from here and see how it goes. What I'm doing here is squaring out the mortises. I cut them with a router to remove most of the material and to the right width. They're 1/2-inch mortises and I used a 1/2-inch bit. And here I'm using a 1/2-inch chisel and squaring out the corners rather than trying to round over the tenons. I prefer this method over rounding over the tenons. So I'm just chiseling down the line, getting everything square. I had, of course, marked everything out with the marking gauges that you can see there. It's a pretty straightforward process. And after I'd gotten this far in, I remembered I had this 1/2-inch mortising chisel, which probably would have been a better choice, but I made do with the regular bench chisel. Those were Narex Richter chisels. I really like them. Some people don't like them because they're kind of longer than regular bench chisels, but I actually prefer that. So what I'm doing here is just dry fitting everything. If you have a somewhat complex assembly, it's not a bad idea to dry fit it before you put glue on everything, because once you glue it and if something doesn't fit quite right, you got yourself a mess to try to clean up and adjust whatever you need to adjust. So it's a good idea to go ahead and dry fit it all. Light tap of the mallet, everything goes together without any distortion, but it's not loose either, so that's what you want. You can see this all went together pretty well. And this is the bottom section of the door. The empty spaces will be filled in with the thinner panels, which we'll get to later. And here I'm going to take it apart. I'm using these parallel bar clamps, turning the jaw around to push instead of squeezing it together. And this actually pushes it apart, and that way I don't have to use a mallet to tap it apart and risk denting the inside surfaces, which I don't have much play to try to do anything about it if I did dent it. The outside, not so much. I can always sand that or, just shave a little bit off of it, but those inside surfaces are pretty much set in stone once it's made. Here, I'm go ahead and sand all these inside surfaces, because once the assembly's put together, it would be really hard to get to the inside of those panels to sand them. So I'm just going to go ahead and preliminary sand them right here using this Bosch 18 volt 5-inch random orbit sander. It's a pretty good little sander. It's a little underpowered being that it's battery powered, but it gets the job done. And that was a 3M Cubitron sandpaper. Good stuff. I'd recommend it. It's a little more expensive than regular sandpaper, but it lasts longer. Dust collection's better. It doesn't clog up as much, and it has a sharper grit. Even on the same grit, like a 220, it sands faster because the grit has sharper edges on it. I'm gluing up the mortise and tenons. I put more glue in the mortise and get a good coating of glue on the tenon, but the excess glue I'd rather have in the mortise. That way when it goes together, the squeeze out tends to go to the bottom of the mortise instead of squeezing out onto the face of the workpiece. I make the mortises a little deeper than the tenons are long to give it a little bit of space for that glue to go into and not cause any interference with everything going together. And I'm using a little paintbrush that I stole from my kids' art supplies to evenly spread the glue. Now, I didn't record clamping that up for whatever reason. I'm new to this. I'll keep forgetting to record. But this part, I'm making the bottom rail for the top section of the door, ripping it down out of my piece of stock there, and I'm going to put a nice chamfer, a big chamfer, a bevel on it, so that if rain hits it, hopefully it'll run off and not sit there, and it gives it a better look too, in my opinion. So I got to put a long tenon on each end of those pieces, and I'll show you here. The waist is marked out with the X, and it's going to have that long tenon in the middle. So I set up the sled and set up my adjustable stop block there. That way I can have a nice consistent cut on all the shoulders. And I'm cutting it and checking the depth of the blade, adjust it just a little bit to get it right up to the line, and leave just a smidgen of the line on there. I don't like to cut it down quite all the way, and I do that all the way around, and then I'm going to make several passes to, cut a bunch of cuts into the waste material, and then I can break most of it off very easily and then clean everything up with a chisel. You can see I got all the shoulders cut there, and I made a mistake. I should have just went ahead and made the several passes while I had the depth set on my first setting, but I didn't do that, so that would have saved me a little bit of time, but it wasn't a big deal. It's just little details like that if you pay attention to, you can save yourself some time having to adjust that saw unnecessarily. This is actual speed. I did not speed this up. This is how fast I cut with that sled. Sometimes the sled may catch on fire. You have to keep a fire extinguisher handy. But this is years of practice, and if you practice, you can do it too. So you can see that the chips are very easy to remove here. You just kind of break them off with your finger, and then of course that leaves that surface there that you can clean up with a chisel and get it shaved down to the line, just so. Now, I forgot to record the chisel work on this. Once again, this is my first video. I'm practicing, trying to get used to recording, but sometimes I just start working and just forget about it. But this is the top assembly. You can see everything's fitting together pretty good. And you can see that line because my router bit was almost not quite long enough to get the depth on that mortise. So when I raised it up, the collet just barely touched around the edge of that mortise, and it gave it just a tiny chamfer. And it makes it look like there's a slight gap, but it actually isn't. It's just a tiny little chamfer from the collet rubbing on it. So basically this is glue up is the same as the bottom section. I put the glue in the mortise, spread it around with the paintbrush, glue on the tenon, spread it around with a paintbrush. Oh, and these paintbrushes, I stole this from my kids' art supply, but if you go on Amazon, or I'm sure there's other places too, you can buy them kind of in bulk. It's like a little bucket of them of like 200 paintbrushes, and they're, I don't know exactly how much it was, but they're fairly inexpensive. It comes out to like a few cents per brush, and it's not a bad deal. If you forget to wash it and the glue gets hard on it, it's not a big deal. You can just toss it and grab you another one. You have 200 of them sitting around in a little bucket, so it's not a big deal. And if you rinse it, you can reuse it over and over. But if you get caught up in the project, which happens to me a lot, forget about it, come back to it later, and it's hard as a rock. But so I'm tapping this in, everything's fitting good. I'm gonna just basically just almost the same procedure as the bottom section of the door. Put this together, and you'll see that the top section, what I'm going to do is make a frame that goes inside there, and that's going to hold the panels for the door, and it's going to screw in place. And I'm going to put wood panels in it to begin with, but they can be replaced later on with glass. I didn't do it right off because this is a playhouse and there is going to be kids in there, and I don't know if the glass panels are a good idea right away. and they would need to be tempered glass. If so, just, you know, kids might break it, and it'd be better tempered rather than plate glass, so nobody gets hurt, and its tempered's actually a good bit tougher. So I'm just tapping this together. You know, if you can, if it's, just use a little block to tap it around. It saves you some wear and tear on your wood piece. And I'm gonna lay it in these parallel clamps and just clamp it up. And by the way, I milled this lumber. This was several years ago. I milled this lumber. It's been sitting in my shop for a couple years in my little wood storage area. So it was good and dry, and it was some nice, fairly tight grain southern yellow pine. I'm not sure if it was loblolly or long leaf pine, but it was one or the other, and there was some good quality logs that I have. I actually have a sawmill as well. I'll probably do some sawmill videos. But that was the clamp up, and I like to oppose the clamps so it doesn't want to twist the sides around. And this here is making the little pieces of stop. Just going to go around the inside of the panels, and I just cut these, rip these pieces down, then I route the edge on both sides of it, and then come back and rip it into the small pieces that are going to be the stop that I'm going to use around the inside of those panels. I got all these ripped up. It's just an OG profile. And these are the pieces that I'm going to make the little frame out of that's going to go in there. That's a Bosch, what do you call it, an articulated miter saw. Really nice saw. I like it a lot. It's fairly new. I've used a couple sliding ones, and that one, that articulated one, was really nice. So that was, you just saw, that's the little frame that's going to go inside the door. I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill the holes. I'm going to screw it together using GRK trim screws. And I really like those screws too. Those are some good screws. I highly recommend them. And a lot of times you don't need to pre-drill. I'm just doing it precautionary just because these pieces are kind of thin, small, and dry. I don't want it to split when I go to screw it together, and it's less tendency for it to want to walk around if you do have a little pilot hole in there. So yeah, I turned it this way. That's made more sense. That way I don't have to keep lifting it up to clearance for the impact driver. That's the frame made up, and I'm tapping it into the top section of the door. Tap it in there and get it close with the mallet, and you'll see in a second I'll take a little piece of wood that's 1/8 inch thick and use it as a gauge block. You can see right, getting ready. Yep, right here, and I get that flush with the surface, and that way I have an 1/8 inch reveal basically on both sides. I think I ripped those 1.5 inches wide, and the door's 1 3/4 inches thick, so that leaves 1/8 of an inch on either side. Get it ready, put it in there, and screw it in. And these are the little pieces of stop. I got everything cut here. So I'm gonna put these in and get the margins even on them. And a little word of advice: if you have long, thin panels like this with trim that goes around the inside, put the short pieces in first. It's much easier. You put the two short ones in, because you can kind of bow the longer piece and get it in there much easier than you can get the short piece in there if you put the long ones in first. So this is the outside. I put a little bit of glue on there and tacked it in with this brad nailer with a 5/8 long brads. These are the panels that are going to fill in the space. Now on the inside of those panels, when I put that stop, I won't glue it. That way I can remove them easily later. And another tip is, when you do the long pieces, don't nail them too close to the ends. That way if you take a putty knife and pop them out later, it's easier to bend them, get the nails out. If you got the nails a few inches back, like 4 or 5 inches back from the ends, and if you nail it right on the end, it makes it really hard to get it out without damaging the wood too much. So there's the panels. They're going in there. That's the bottom section of the door. And then that stop goes around, and I just tack it in with the brad nailer. Like I said, no glue on the inside, glue the outside. This is mortising for the hinges, and I take a chisel and chisel out the perimeter. When you start, don't chisel right to the line. Come back about 30 seconds or so and stay away from the line. Chisel straight down, because your chisel will want to go pushing both ways at first. So yeah, you can see you chisel straight down, then chisel in at an angle to give it a little bit of relief. And then I come with this little palm router, straight cut bit, set the depth of the bit with the hinge. That way it comes out flush. And then I use the palm router, route out most of the waste material. Start on one end of the hinge and work your way to the other end. Being careful, take your time. Get most of it down, removed, and then you can take your chisel and finish it out. And then, if you did it right and have everything laid out pretty good, once you get all the rest of that chisel down exactly to your line, your hinge should fit like a glove. You can see I put it in there, and it gives a nice satisfying little pop when it pops down in there. It doesn't move around, doesn't wiggle, and it sits almost dead flush. So then this is a self-centering bit. You can see this little tip is spring-loaded, and it's got a bevel that fits on the inside of those tapered holes for the screws. Put your hinge in there. You want it to get it to pop in like it's supposed to. Then that will self-center into those holes. And then when you push it down, the drill bit that's the perfect size for the pilot holes pops a hole right exactly where you want them. Now I'm trimming the bottom of the door off. I made it a little bit taller than it needed to be, so that way I knew I was going to get to this point and be able to trim it off. I like to score it first with a knife to go ahead and cut that grain so I don't have tear out. I clamp the straight edge on it and then use the router with a straight cut bit and then route down a ½ inch or so deep, and it gives you a nice straight line, and it leaves a nice clean surface. And if you scored it with the knife, you don't have to worry about the tear out. Take your time. Then I switched bits to this one with the bottom bearing, flip the door over, and that bearing rides on the first surface that you cut with the straight edge, and it cleans it up beautifully. Just leaves it, is better than a circular saw can do. And that's the door complete. That's the horizontal panels are the bottom and the vertical ones are the top. Now this is the frame. I'm going to go ahead. I already ripped these down and had them all planed, these boards. They're about 7/8 of an inch thick. Go ahead and pre-drill all the holes, put a little pilot, and I'm using the GRK screws. These are the cabinet screws. They actually have a truss head, because you're not going to see these anyway, and that truss head really holds good, and they got the thread on the screws is really good too. They really bite. Pre-drilling the threshold, and same thing with that. I'm going to use those cabinet screws that have the nice truss head, and I'm screwing all this together so I can unscrew it, take it to the site, and I'll put it back together again at site, and it makes it a lot easier to transport. And well, this is the stop. I made it 2 pieces, and I put a little saw kerf for weather stripping. So what I did was got the bottom cut to where it fit good to the threshold, and it's still a bit long. The top piece will go in first. So I just took a scrap piece of the stop and scribed the top once I had the bottom cut. Then cut it to length and get it fitting proper. And put the top piece in first, tacked it in there. Then this is putting the sides in. Everything fits good. A little bit of sliver left, and that's that saw kerf where the weather stripping will go. I run a little bead of glue on there, put it in there, and then tack it in with a brad nailer. And I think I used a 1-inch brads on this. That stop is a little over a ½ inch thick. The frame pieces are 7/8 thick, so I use the short brads on that, and that's it in the building. I don't have the handle on it now here yet, but you can see what it all looks like. This is from the inside when I was installing it, putting the handle on. You can see how it works. And that's the inside of the playhouse. And I think it came out pretty nice. I might do another video of actually installing it and putting the frame together and everything, but you can see here what it all looks like. And I think it came out pretty good. Okay, so if you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for watching. This is my first video. I'm going to try to do a lot more of a lot of different things. I like the creative woodworking and just regular construction type woodworking. I've framed houses for almost 25 years. I started off as a kid working with my dad. When I was 12 years old, I was out on the job putting joists and hanging rafters and building walls, sheathing, and for good solid 20 years that's what I did, interior trim. And I'm trying to get into fine woodworking, cabinetry, furniture building, making doors, things like that. Getting old, I can't be swinging around like a monkey anymore. Had 3 surgeries this year, one for cut tendons in my hand and 2 for 2 different hernias. So I gotta slow down. I can't go out there swinging a hammer and slinging plywood like I used to. So I'm looking for something else to do and maybe make some interesting videos of some nice projects. This here's the front of the shop. I built this from scratch. Used the sawmill to make all the siding and everything that you can see here. In the process of building another shop because this one's already becoming too small, and I could use this building for other things more related to the family of having it's for storage and kid stuff and whatnot. My partner, she has MCS, so we can't have any fragrances or anything, and that's a big reason why everything's made from scratch. There's nothing that's anybody else has touched. And another reason why I want to make another shop, because this is kind of attached to our living space, so I can't just have people coming in here like I would like to, my friends and other people that I'd like to have come into the shop or work with me, or at least just check out the shop. So I'm building a separate building just for that. And it's going to be bigger because I got tools that I can't even put in here now, more machines and all. And like I said, I don't have room for a traditional workbench in there for hand tool woodworking, which is something I also enjoy, and I don't get to do as much of it as I would like. But thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Give me a thumbs down if you didn't like the video. Subscribe if you would like or not. It's up to you. But like I said, I like more creative woodworking things, and I'm going to try to put out a lot of videos, during the rest of my career. I've been inspired by so many people on YouTube that I've watched their videos and have taught me a lot. So I'm just trying to spread that around a little more, and an outlet so more people can be inspired by what I'm doing, and maybe I can have some instruction to help some people. And I'm going to do more tool reviews, things like that. Maybe even videos unrelated to woodworking. We travel up and down the East Coast a lot. We have a little cabin in upstate New York, and this is in southeast Georgia here. So usually try to go up there during the summertime to get away from the heat here, and come back here to get away from the cold winters up there. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the idea. So you see a good bit of the Appalachian Mountains and the East Coast, and I'd like to do some videos maybe on the travel stuff. And I got a lot of other interests. Do not as much as I used to, but in the firearms and whatnot. I'm pondering that. I don't know, there's a lot of people doing that now, so I don't know if I'd have much input on that. But that's it, and thanks for watching. I'm not going to bore you standing here talking, but I appreciate your time, and I'm going to try to do a follow-up video of this pretty soon. Maybe installing this door. It's already put in, and some more things though. Building the other shop, I've been recording that as well, and I'm just new to the editing. It's been a journey to me to learn how to do it and get the equipment to do it, and it's a lot of work. I had to give credit to the people that make these videos. It's a lot of work to sit down for hours and watch hours of footage of yourself and to try to get through it and just to get it down to a manageable length, so you're not just rambling or watching repetitive tasks or like me rambling now. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Like I said, thumbs up, thumbs down, subscribe if you like. I'm going to be putting out more stuff when I get a chance. Good, thanks.